Welcome to the 2022 Robert F. Kennedy Book and Journalism Awards. We will begin shortly. This ceremony and all of the important programs at RFK Human Rights rely on donations from generous friends. So we would like to express our thanks to the Mortimer B. Zuckerman Family Foundation for their gift, which makes this ceremony possible. If you enjoy this evening's celebration and would like to see more content from RFK programs, please consider supporting our efforts. Click on the QR code on your screen to donate. Our program will begin shortly.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Robert Francis Kennedy Book and Journalism Awards. We are meeting at a time, obviously, that would have made, in many ways, Robert Kennedy shudder. A time of an obscene war against Ukraine, of rising injustice in our own country, rising hatred, and even the question whether American democracy is going to survive. We wish we had Robert Kennedy leading us and fighting with us as we fight for democracy, but in his absence, we have his memory and we have his values adopted by those who write about the problems we're dealing with now, and those who are fighting to preserve the democratic ideals that come from the 18th century. In his absence, we recognize books and journalism that help to carry that torch forward, and that's what brings us together. We are lucky to have Robert Kennedy's daughter, Kerry Kennedy, our friend and the world's friend, author, attorney, activist, and president of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. Kerry?
Thank you, Michael, Peggy, and all the judges, and thanks to all of you for joining us as we honor the journalists and writers who share a calling to expose injustice. They cajole us, they disturb us, they inspire us. Thank you. Turn on any news channel featuring a story about the crisis in Ukraine, and you'll see a journalist delivering a live report with bombs going off in the background. When others are fleeing the onslaught, news professionals are flying into the flames. They are the first targets of enemy fire, easily identified by large cameras and press IDs. Ukraine may be the focus right now, but this life-threatening reality facing the press is far from isolated. Journalism remains one of the most dangerous professions in the world, right up there with landmine destroyers, coal miners, and frontline soldiers. Last year, 27 journalists were killed around the world. This year, we are on pace to quickly surpass that. 16 have died so far, 7 while on assignment covering the war in Ukraine, and others in Mexico, Haiti, Chad, India, and Myanmar. Journalists know better than anyone that what they do is not just a job. It is a daily act of faith, a commitment to head into the hardest, darkest corners of the world in order to bring the truth into the light of day. At Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights, our lawyers work across the globe suing governments which target journalists. But today, we celebrate those journalists. The Rfk Journalism Awards were founded in 1968 to recognize journalists who are brave enough to speak truth to power. Our RFK Book Awards were established 12 years later to annually recognize the book that most faithfully and forcefully reflects my father's ideals, his concern for the poor and the powerless, his struggle for even-handed justice, and his faith in free democracy. We all know that the first step to creating change is exposing injustice. And this year's winners have done this across the board, from the New York Times for its groundbreaking analysis of drone airstrikes gone wrong that consistently take out civilians, to the staff of the Miami Herald for examining the systemic and inhumane treatment by the state of Florida towards families with disabled children. Today, We also celebrate the accomplishment of student journalists, including the staff of Hillcrest High School's radio station for their honesty and bravery exposing the perceptions of Black teenagers in an overwhelmingly white school, and to the middle schoolers in Kurztown, Pennsylvania, who are openly defying local book bans. Both across the United States and around the world, freedom of expression is under attack more than ever. Protecting this fundamental right is at the core of what we do at Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. In 2018, we made history when the Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruled in our favor, and for the first time in the history of Latin America, a country, Colombia, was held accountable in the murder of a journalist, Nelson Carbajal. Our International Advocacy and Litigation Division continues to take on cases of journalists in the international arena who are silenced at the hands of government oppression. In Egypt, we condemn the imprisonment of a 29-year-old graduate student who was convicted on unfounded charges of publishing false news from outside the country about internal affairs and sentenced to imprisonment for 4 years. In Somalia, our team guided the release of a radio editor after nearly 5 long months in arbitrary detention for writing critically on security forces. This work is never over, and we pledge to continue to fight for journalists' rightful place in the work to protect civic space at home and abroad. But today, we are here to celebrate journalists' invaluable contributions to bringing us the world through their eyes, no matter the costs. Thank you, and congratulations.
Before we begin with the awards, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the 2022 Journalism Committee. Roberta Baskin, Jennifer Eight Lee, Kimberly Adams, John Siegenthaler Jr., Alicia Shepard, Karen Tumulty, and Jim Wooten. In addition to this outstanding team, I'd also like to thank the dozens of judges who took part throughout the selection process. As I speak, journalists are literally risking their lives to keep us informed in war zones like Ukraine. They are also keeping us all informed in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. Journalists are documenting the continuing heartbreak of a virus that has killed more than 6 million people worldwide. What we've seen in this last year is something we already knew, that a vibrant, fearless, aggressive free press is what sustains us. It protects us and our institutions and keeps our democracy strong. During the next hour, we will show you some of the courageous journalists on the front line, risking their lives in places like Afghanistan and risking their freedom in places like the Philippines. We will celebrate the type of journalism that explores the varied issues important to Robert F. Kennedy, themes like human rights, social justice, and the power of individual action. Once again this year, we are grateful to have special presenters helping us to award these coveted honors.
Our college winners at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln started their project with a simple question. What's it like to be Black in Lincoln? The answers they got were complex, varied, and troubling, with many respondents talking about racial profiling, housing discrimination, and police harassment. Here's some of the award-winning series, Being Black in Lincoln.
These resourceful college students delved into the subject of being Black in Lincoln. They profiled a cross-section of the community, people like Carla Cooper and Wahadi Allen. Through their reporting, we meet Albert Maxey, a star basketball player who won a scholarship from Indiana and stayed. He would become one of the first Black officers in Lincoln, spending a day with Martin Luther King Jr. during his visit to the city. But he was also the victim of prejudice. When he arrived on one domestic violence call, the victim told him, "No, I want a real cop." These powerful, eye-opening profiles ended up being carried in the Lincoln Journal-Star, Nebraska's second largest newspaper.
The College Journalism Award winner is the University of Nebraska-Lincoln College of Journalism and Mass Communication team for their extensive series, Being Black in Lincoln.
This year's High School Print Award winner did an amazing job of investigating income inequality in his own school. The student at Clayton High School in Missouri wrote this year's award-winning piece, Unlivable Wages. Take a look.
Clayton, Missouri high school student Owen Austin Babcock learned that sometimes the best stories are the ones right in front of you. He spent countless hours working on the Globe's December cover story, Unlivable Wages. He took a deep dive to find that countless workers at his high school learning center were not making a livable wage. He profiles Nino La Madrid, who's been working for the district for 14 years. The one-time actuary and college math instructor makes $26,000 a year, a salary that has remained largely unchanged during his time at the school. The young journalist points out that a single St. Louis County adult without children needs at least $29,500 just for yearly expenses. While these staffers are an exceptional resource for students, they are struggling to get by. One moonlights as a Lyft driver just to eke out a living. A proposal to raise wages is stalled with district administrators, prompting the Globe to put this quote on the cover. And so we waited, but we didn't see any change.
Congratulations to reporter Owen Austin Babcock for his Unlivable Wages. The Globe, Clayton High School, which is this year's winner for high school print.
Our high school broadcast winner created a podcast on The Talk. You know, the one that kids get from their parents that can be very awkward. Only Junior Jaela Burris isn't talking about the birds and the bees.
What we're here to talk about today is like the talk. People like what the talk is, like if their parents gave them the talk.
Not their parents sitting down and talking about the birds and the bees.
To us, we might get that talk, but we're gonna get a second one as well.
The black talk.
Yeah, around the time we start driving.
Be honest.
Yeah.
The black talk.
That's what it is.
One student shares how his parents had the talk after he was out playing hide and seek with his white friends late at night.
You can't just be out at night, like in the dark, because you're black. It's not safe. Just because like they have that worry that somebody's gonna see me in their yard and think I'm doing something wrong.
Talking about the talk leads to another, as these students discuss the profound impact of the death of George Floyd.
His death was symbolic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It was huge.
Do you see this right now? You see the goosebumps?
Right.
I'm telling you, it was powerful. Like it.
People don't realize how much this
me.
stuff affects us. Like I'm 17 years old and I'm over here about to cry. Like
For no,
like, just
that's
thinking
how
about
it be.
it.
And when you feel like that, it make you want to rise up and just say something. But every time you say something, you just keep getting beat down.
Every time I say something, I'm loud and angry.
Exactly. They take you for what that stereotypical black girl is, but it's not. We're just tired of the BS and we want change.
We want to congratulate Jaela Burris of Hillcrest High School in Springfield, Missouri, for her award-winning entry, The Talk.
Our domestic print winners introduced us to families who suffered in the dark in the state of Florida. The Miami Herald teamed with ProPublica to show the heartbreak of families dealing with the Neurological Injury Compensation Association, or NICA. It was designed to help parents with children who suffered catastrophic brain injuries at birth. But as this team of journalists shows us, NICA was and is a nightmare. Here is the sampling.
I had a perfect pregnancy until his due date.
As we started talking about more and more, we realized that things probably should have went differently. It was about an hour after the 911 call was placed that he was actually delivered, when it should have been about 15 minutes later. From what I've read online is as soon as the stat C-section is ordered, they just start prepping the operating room so that when Lindsay shows up, they can perform it immediately and then lessen the amount of damage to the child. And with this doctor deciding it was an emergency and putting it off for 30, 40 minutes, it seemed like something very wrong was done.
Blood and oxygen stopped flowing to Cooper Riley Johnson's brain before his birth. Minutes saved could have resulted in a miracle baby, but that's not what happened.
Date 8 is when we decided to take Cooper off the ventilator, and that's when he passed away.
Well, that's what was recommended.
And it was by far and will always be the hardest choice I ever made.
As this series by the Miami Herald and ProPublica points out, the couple's voice and others like them would be stifled by a program called NICA. It was passed by the Florida legislature in 1988. It's designed to protect against suits by parents whose children suffered catastrophic brain injuries at birth, often the result of negligence.
I know I had to sign that stupid form to be a patient. When you sign it, you move along because you want to get your treatment. So I really didn't know what it was, and it was never really explained to me.
After the tragedy, the couple, facing mounting debts, accepted the modest compensation from NICA, a decision they regret.
Now that we signed the paperwork, this doctor has nothing on his record. Nobody knows better unless they know how to search a NICA case, which I didn't until this whole story happened, and he gets away scot-free.
Because of stories like these and others, lawmakers unanimously passed a reform bill 3 weeks after these stories were published.
It's horrible, and this should not happen to anybody. No parent should go through this. I don't want it to happen to any more parents.
The domestic print winners are the team from the Miami Herald and ProPublica for Birth and Betrayal. Our congratulations to Miami Herald reporters Carol Marvin Miller and Daniel Chang. Here is journalist and best-selling author Michael Lewis, who will introduce our international print winners.
There's been reporting on the situation in Xinjiang, China. Our international award winners provide us with a long-form investigative piece that looks at abuses, including mass internment of ethnic Uyghur and Kazakh minorities. Ghost Walls is perhaps the deepest, farthest-reaching narrative account to ever be published in a magazine. Here's a look at the New Yorker's Ghost Walls.
Ghost Walls is the story of Honor Sabat. She built a life in Canada but returned to China after the death of her father. But the Xinjiang Autonomous Region had changed since her last time there. In 2017, a parade of 10,000 troops ushered in a smashing, obliterating offensive aimed at ethnic Uyghurs and Kazakh minorities. Despite doing nothing wrong except returning home, she's ensnared in the campaign and sent off to a political re-education camp. The New Yorker piece details her struggles and, by doing so, provides one of the deepest, most far-reaching narratives on the Chinese internment camp system in Xinjiang.
The International Print Award is given to Rafi Kachadorian of The New Yorker for Ghost Walls.
Ansel Adams once said, "When words become unclear, I shall focus with photographs." There have been a lot of words used to describe the Black Lives Matter movement, but our domestic photography winner uses imagery to show the pain and power of this critical moment in time. Our winning entry is from the Washington Post's Joshua Lott. Here's a look at social injustice.
Domestic photography judges were impressed with the range of images from Joshua Lott. He provides powerful insight into this moment in history. He's there to capture passion on the streets and the deep personal grief of the families of George Floyd and Dante Wright. Lott won the trust of Courtney Ross, George Floyd's girlfriend, as she bridges both worlds. Wright was her student when she was the dean at Edison High School. Lott's intimate approach lands in moments of joy in the courtroom. This time, justice was served. There's sadness and reflection. A mantel place is now a place of honor in this home. There's a message that reads, "Wherever a beautiful soul has been, there is a trail of beautiful memories. When that beautiful soul is unarmed and shot to death by police, there's also a sea of tears. The hugs help, but the misery remains."
The domestic photography winner is Joshua Lott of the Washington Post for the entry Social Injustice. Congratulations, Joshua, for your very powerful photographs. Now, here's acclaimed documentary filmmaker Rfk Kennedy to tell us about this year's winner in the International Photography category.
Robert Frank once wrote that there is one thing the photo must contain: the humanity of the moment. Our International Photography winner captures both humanity and inhumanity as he is sent to witness the collapse of Afghanistan. Marcus Yam of the Los Angeles Times captures heartbreaking images that will move you and stay with you. Here's a look at the fall of Afghanistan.
Two men in the back of a van, their faces gripped by fear and uncertainty as chaos engulfs a capital that's collapsing. Marcus Yam documents it all in this expansive body of work. He's there as Taliban fighters pray before their Kalashnikov rifles, the weapon that came to define killing in the name of jihad. His pictures evoke thought-provoking questions, like what will happen to these women and children huddled together in a terrifying conflict zone now that the Taliban has returned. Some don't want to find out. They make their way through this flooded street towards the airport entrance, as evacuation flights fly overhead carrying the lucky ones out of this quickly collapsing city. Yam is the first journalist on the scene after a U.S. drone strike kills 10. He captures the incinerated, mangled wreckage that remains. His executive editor says this image turned the world's attention to the plight of Afghans. A little boy in anguish, while behind him a man cradles a smaller child's limp, bloodied body. He takes all of these photos at great personal risk. In fact, one image tells the story of just how dangerous it is to be a journalist in this rapidly changing Afghanistan. Two Afghan reporters removed their clothing to show torture endured for covering a rally for women's rights under Taliban rule. As Yam writes, their backs and legs are like angry maps painted upon them. Yam understands why he's here. He took their pictures and sent them into the world.
The International Photography winner is Marcus Yam of the Los Angeles Times.
Our radio-winning entry began with a promise made years ago. Reveal host and reporter Al Letson was reporting in rural Mississippi when he heard about the mysterious death of a high school football star. He promised to return and conduct a proper investigation. He did, and the result is the series Mississippi Goddamn, The Ballad of Billy Joe. Let's listen.
Mississippi Goddamn follows Reveal host and reporter Al Letson to Lucedale, Mississippi, where he looks into the mysterious death of Billy Joe Johnson.
This is Reveal's serial investigation.
He was a promising high school football star, destined for college and perhaps the pros.
Everybody knows about Mississippi Goddamn.
Mississippi Goddamn, The Ballad of Billy Joe. He was a football star with a bright future and everything to look forward to.
Instead, he dies during a traffic stop by a white deputy in 2008. Authorities say he took his own life. Friends who knew him say he wasn't suicidal.
Suicide, no. A happy person walking around every day for what?
That's what I was saying, because somebody had asked me that, and I was more or less like, are you kidding me? We talked about stuff. I talked to my brother Sunday, the day before. We talked forever, talked about everything. He didn't sound he didn't sound like he was depressed to me.
Over a 3-year span, Letson and reporter Jonathan Jones poured through documents, listened to over 100 hours of audio recordings. There were numerous interviews with sources. The result is a 7-part series. They learned Johnson was harassed by white officers. They prove the investigation is flawed and the case should be reopened. But in a sign of the systemic racism, they explain why there are no signs that will ever happen.
See, I remember what it felt like to be a black kid in a little southern town where it seemed like no one cared or could hear you, where justice was a theory you never saw in practice.
Letson opens up, again, about his own rage and pain as the series comes to a close.
You want people to have some kind of
hope. And I told you that like I wanted to like make people angry, and I do. But I think what I was trying to do with this is give the Johnsons some hope, and I don't think we did. I don't know, it just breaks my heart.
The radio winner this year is the extensive investigative series Mississippi Goddamn: The Ballad of Billy Joe. Our congratulations to Reveal's Al Letson and reporter Jonathan James for their extraordinary efforts. Now, let's hear about our new media winner. Here's CNN's White House correspondent, John Harwood.
The new media winner is a multi-year investigation by the New York Times Magazine. It takes a long, hard look at this new age of warfare. It's sold as less boots on the ground in a more precise, high-tech, remote conflict. But Azmat Khan finds this new age of warfare is riddled with intelligence flaws, miscalculations, and morally questionable calls. The results are tragic. Here's a look at airstrikes gone wrong.
The Pentagon saw this as a strike against terror. The car they targeted in Afghanistan was said to be driven by a facilitator for the Islamic State. His trunk was packed with explosives. But the New York Times visual investigative team looked into the drone strike. What they found is the driver was a longtime aid worker. The items in the trunk were water canisters and not explosives. 10 people were killed, including the aid worker, Zinari Ahmadi, and 7 children. A week after the New York Times expose, the Pentagon acknowledged some of the last victims of America's longest war died as a result of a tragic mistake. But the Times' Azmat Khan found that mistakes like these were not uncommon. The Times' compelling investigation, Airstrikes Gone Wrong, looked into a number of bombings that killed or wounded thousands of innocent civilians, including a number of children. The newspaper's investigation was stymied by the U.S. government, but in the end, after a suit by Khan, she was able to comb through thousands of military reports to show the downside of drones and the human cost of these errors.
The new media winner is the staff at the New York Times for Airstrikes Gone Wrong. Now let's learn about this year's cartoon winner.
This year's cartoon winner is Clay Jones. Judges cited his work as a standout submission, covering human rights and hitting on themes of imbalances of power and systemic racism. Jones has a unique style. It's energetic, as he uses the image and text to comment on larger issues. Here's a look at some of his important portfolio.
Clay Jones focuses attention on systemic racism with this cartoon directed at the state of Georgia after it passes its so-called Election Integrity Act. He's also not afraid to call out racist cops, with this entry showing the Derek Chauvin defense team argument and the reaction from the jury. When Dante Wright was shot and killed, he drew this cartoon, which called into question Officer Kim Potter's contention that she mistook her firearm for a taser. He lampooned the Republican Party with this drawing of the U.S. Senate. He also wasn't afraid to demonstrate the hypocrisy of Republicans quick with dog whistles on critical race theory, but virtually silent after mass school shootings. When the Taliban returned to power in Afghanistan, Clay quickly drew up this panel calling out Taliban abuse of women. Jones' acerbic wit is also on display with this panel, showing the unlikely pairing of O.J. Simpson and Kyle Rittenhouse. O.J. says, "Kyle's agreed to help me find the real killers."
Our cartoon winner is Clay Jones Cartoons. Congratulations, Clay, on your win.
Our domestic television winning entry starts with the tragic story of Jasmine Willock. She was shot and killed by her boyfriend, who also took his own life. As a convicted abuser, he was prohibited from having a weapon under federal law, but law enforcement had allowed him to keep the gun that claimed her life. Al Jazeera, in a joint effort with Reveal, looks into this case and others in this remarkable documentary, Unrelinquished. Here's a look.
Jason, please, Aiken.
Yeah, can I have a wellness check on my daughter, Jasmine Willock? And the reason for the check, welfare? She didn't go to work for the last 2 days. The guy she's with is going to court for beating her, so I don't know if she's alive or not. So I need somebody to check on her.
This powerful documentary weaves together strong investigative reporting with compelling emotional testimony from family members of victims. As revealed, the Center for Investigative Reporting teams with Al Jazeera's Fault Lines to provide a call to action on an issue that's rarely covered.
Every month, an average of 57 women in the U.S. are shot and killed by their intimate partners. A number of these offenders were prohibited from having guns because of their criminal records. But we don't know how many because no one's keeping track.
Reporter Jennifer Gollin tells the story of Jasmine Willock. She's beautiful, smart, and witty.
Oh, we got some New York strip steak, we got some flank steak, we got some carne asada. You know what that means? No steak.
I always think of the videos we have of her when she would just be goofy and laughing.
Her family says Jasmine was full of life until her partner took her life with a handgun.
The laws are incomplete. It doesn't say that the judges have to order police officers to go get those guns. It doesn't say that they have to do a follow-up hearing to make sure that the person actually turned in a gun like they were ordered.
So basically, we're operating on the honor system.
The honor system doesn't work. Under U.S. law, people convicted of felonies and certain domestic violence crimes are banned from having guns.
It's just hard not having Jazz around. She's ripped out of our lives, and unfairly. I just try to know that she's now safe and not getting hurt. It just makes you angry that the system did nothing to help.
The domestic television winner is a joint effort between the team at Reveal, the Center for Investigative Reporting, and Al Jazeera's Fault Line. Congratulations. Now here's Ari Melber with our international television winner.
Hi, everyone. Ari Melbourne. I'm thrilled to be with you. Many of you have heard of Maria Ressa. After all, she's a Nobel Prize winner and Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Now, award-winning filmmaker Ramona Diaz and Frontline are sharing with us a view of her life fighting against the attacks on press freedom by Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. Here's a look at 1,000 Cuts.
Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. We are at the 2018 State of the Nation address. Use the hashtag SONA2018.
1,000 Cuts tells the story of Maria Ressa and her scrappy band of relentless Rappler reporters as they expose an iron-fisted Rodrigo Duterte.
President Duterte, right after his inauguration, stood on a platform and said, if you're into drugs, sometime in the next few years you will make a mistake and I will kill you. It took 3 hours. The first body was found a few blocks away from where he spoke.
Impunity in the drug war was a continuing series. We put faces and names to the people being killed. We demanded the government be held accountable. Anyone on Facebook who questioned the people who were being killed was automatically bashed.
Ressa's reporting also uncovered a wide-ranging, chilling disinformation campaign in the Philippines.
Mid-September, I started writing. First, the weaponization of the internet. The second piece was how Facebook algorithms impact democracy. As soon as we released it, we got pounded. I was getting an average of 90 hate messages per hour.
The disinformation campaign grew. Rappler was attacked as a tool of the CIA under foreign control. The truth became a casualty, and Ressa became a target.
Ms. Ressa was one of 4 journalists named as Time Magazine's Person of the Year for what Time called, quote, great risks in pursuit of greater truth. The government's response has been to arrest her.
A prominent Philippines journalist, Maria Ressa, has been arrested on fraud charges. Last month, Ms. Ressa, the executive editor of a news website, Rappler, was arrested over an alleged internet libel case.
The never-ending attacks on Ressa and her team of young journalists begins to take its toll.
See, Maria says a lot. She doesn't scare easily. I do.
And I'm just so proud of my company that despite all of our attacks, all of the legal cases against us, they still muster the resources and the willpower to file a case on our behalf.
These journalists never give up pursuing the news, even reporting on the story they feared, the story they dreaded, the one they never wanted to see.
I'm here at the Manila Regional Trial Court, where Branch 46 has just convicted Maria Ressa over cyber libel charges.
The international television winner is Ramona Diaz and the team at Frontline for 1,000 Cuts.
Now it's my honor to announce this year's Criminal Justice Reform Prize. 3 reporters from USA Today meticulously detailed a major system-wide problem with too many American police forces. Behind the Blue Wall documents how whistleblowing police officers are routinely retaliated against severely when they're just trying to speak up and correct misconduct.
This powerful expose behind the blue wall of silence tells the story of whistleblowers who refuse to look the other way. But by doing the right thing, they put their careers at risk, and they're labeled as rats and traitors.
The first time I watched the video was very disturbing. I'm being told that they tried saving Eric Lurie. It's a horrible cover-up. I can't believe these are officers that I knew that did this to this man.
Wake up, bitch!
Let's go! Goes for his throat.
Open your mouth.
I kept thinking, let go of his nose. Let go of his nose. Let go of his nose. Minute and 38 seconds. Eric Lurie wasn't combative in the backseat of the squad car. He was incoherent. He looked like he needed medical attention. To me, it was worse than what happened to George Floyd.
Javier Escuida was so disturbed by the dashboard video and inaction by his department that he leaked it to the media. He knew the potential consequences as departments often demote, fire, shun, or discredit these courageous officers.
I've been representing Joliet police officers since 1992. This is all about the next guy. This is all about what happens if you speak out.
I'm charged with 4 felonies. If I'm convicted of a felony, I lose my entire pension of 28 years.
God bless any police officer that'll raise his hand and say, hey, this just wasn't right. I mean, there's no holds barred when they come at you like this.
It has to be change. Biggest fear, no change at all, and then you're gonna have more Eric Luries, more George Floyds, more wasted lives.
So this series demonstrates that the blue code of silence is impacting the administration of justice in too many American cities. So for its impact, for its depth, the series Behind the Blue Wall is awarded the Robert F. Kennedy Criminal Justice Reform Prize. Now, here's John Siegenthaler Jr.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I want to start by saying a word of thanks to Kerry Kennedy and Rfk Human Rights for your commitment to these journalism awards and to this work, and to Ethel Kennedy for her grace in guiding these awards for so many years. I'm proud to be a part. The Siegenthaler Prize is named in honor of my father, who was a fearless journalist, also a fierce defender of the First Amendment. As friends of this award know only too well, for many years he co-chaired the RFK Book Prize Committee. He was also a trusted aide and friend to Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, and a lifelong champion of civil rights. While trying to protect the Freedom Riders in Montgomery, Alabama in 1961, he was beaten by an angry white mob. This award is meant to recognize reporting under difficult circumstances that requires courage and commitment. I'm proud to announce the 2022 John Siegenthaler Courage in Journalism Award is given to Azmat Khan and her colleagues at the New York Times Magazine for their compelling investigation, Airstrikes Gone Wrong. It's a comprehensive evaluation of civilian casualties in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. It showed the continual errors by the U.S. military in bombing civilians rather than military targets. Kahn's analysis was frustrated by the U.S. government, forcing her to file suit against the Pentagon and the U.S. Central Command. For this comprehensive analysis, completed in dangerous conflict zones, I'm happy to congratulate the New York Times for winning the Siegenthaler Courage in Journalism Award.
The 2022 Grand Prize winner is the comprehensive and compelling series, Birth and Betrayal. These powerful articles detail a state-run fund in Florida that is supposed to help families care for children brain damaged at birth. Parents are prevented from suing if their babies are harmed. Instead, obstetricians pay $5,000 a year into a fund to compensate them for their child's care. But what reporters Carol Marbin Miller and Daniel Craig found was appalling. The expose by the Miami Herald and ProPublica produced changes. The fund's director and the entire board resigned. This extraordinary journalistic effort illuminated the type of misconduct and unfairness that Robert F. Kennedy was passionate about removing from American life. So we salute and congratulate the Miami Herald and ProPublica for this urgent body of work. Now, once again, here's Michael Beschloss.
We want to thank all of our winning journalists. We celebrate you, we need you, we honor you, we support everything you do to speak truth to power at a time in America when it was never more essential. Again, huge congratulations. And now it's time for our book award. Before we introduce our winners, I would like to acknowledge the late Arthur Schlesinger Jr. As you know, Arthur wrote the wonderful book, Robert Kennedy and His Times, which came out in 1978, and he used some of the proceeds from the sale of that book to finance this book award, which has gone on ever since. Arthur wanted to honor authors who shared Robert Kennedy's ideals and his convictions. And fortunately, there are a lot of authors to choose from of whom that is true. Before we get to our prize authors, I'd like to thank my fellow judges, world class as usual. We were lucky enough to have author and journalist Jane Mayer, author and historian Annette Gordon-Reed, and author and historian Ted Widmer. This year, as I mentioned earlier, we had to select a winner from among many people who would have excelled in this category. And as a result, we felt so strongly about two of the books that we decided to give the award to both of them. Books that explore some of the most pressing and burning issues of our time. The first book to receive the Robert Francis Kennedy Book Award in 2022 is America on Fire by Elizabeth Hinton, which delves into the untold story of police violence and Black rebellions since the 1960s. Hinton shows how public policy in the United States is caught in a never-ending loop. Police violence leads to rebellion. Society responds with more policing. Then there are more incidents and more rebellion. You will read this book and you will understand it. Now we are going to have the treat of listening to the first winner of the 2022 Robert Francis Kennedy Book Award, Elizabeth Hinton.
I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the Robert F. Kennedy Book Prize Committee and to Kerry Kennedy. This is a completely unexpected and deeply meaningful recognition. I accept this award in honor of my maternal grandmother, Eleanor Perlman. Eleanor died before I was born, and so I never met her, but one of her most prized possessions was a letter she received from Robert F. Kennedy when he was Attorney General, dated October 24th, 1963. My grandmother was on the board of directors of the National Council of Jewish Women at the time, and Attorney General Kennedy wrote to share the testimony he gave to the House Judiciary Committee outlining the administration's position on civil rights legislation. It was a boilerplate letter that he likely sent and signed to hundreds, if not thousands of others across the country as part of his larger commitment to realize the United States that lived up to its founding ideals. Towards the end of his testimony, Attorney General Kennedy suggested that the Civil Rights Bill was a test of whether, quote, the white population believes in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, or just mouths the hallowed words of these two documents. Of course, the bill passed, ending Jim Crow segregation, but the struggle was far from over. Kennedy and my grandmother and countless other inspiring champions of social justice spent the rest of their lives fighting for a more equitable society. It was in that spirit that I wrote America on Fire, a true labor of love for me. I wanted to illuminate a largely forgotten chapter of this nation's past in order to meaningfully address one of the most pressing domestic social problems of our time, the way that policing strategies and prison systems have functioned as a central engine of social inequality since the Civil Rights Movement, since Robert F. Kennedy's untimely and tragic death. I hope that this history can help us recognize the misguided policies that have steered this nation ever since. Investments in law enforcement, surveillance, and incarceration over employment, housing, healthcare, and educational opportunities for the nation's most vulnerable. Enlightened policies that Robert F. Kennedy himself consistently championed, both in his testimony before Congress that he sent to my grandmother and in his role as senator. We can only imagine what this country might look like today had he lived to lead the nation out of the fiery 1960s. We follow Robert F. Kennedy's example and the example set by the Kennedy Center for Human Rights to expose injustice and keep fighting for justice to create a better nation and a better world, even in moments when change is being tested. Thank you for this. And Noni, this is for you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us, and thank you for writing such a wonderful book on an issue that is so crucial in 2022. Winning also the Robert Francis Kennedy Book Award for 2022 is Heather McGhee for The Sum of Us: What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. The Sum of Us is an amazing book from a descendant of enslaved people. McGhee skillfully demonstrates that while racism may be aimed at some, it affects us all. We now have the honor of hearing from Heather McGhee about The Sum of Us.
Thank you to the board and leadership of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights and to the selection committee for the book award. I'm blown away by this honor. It's special to me. And obviously, although I never knew him, Bobby Kennedy is special to me. He was an empath, a bridge builder, and a fighter. I've been inspired by the outsized impact that he had in his too short life, the way he drew people to his vision of shared humanity and his belief in the power of collective action and good government to not only change the world, but to redeem our souls. Now, more than ever, we look to his example and to that of Dr. King, whom we lost just months before. And we need not wonder what they would say to us now, as the threat of racist authoritarianism is again on the rise, as books are being banned, democracy subverted, and as the worst elements of our society are telling white Americans that we are their enemy. We need not wonder. What we need in the United States, he told us, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be Black. Bobby Kennedy left a legacy of deeds and words that guide us still. And of course, he also left a family whose members serve us still. And for that, and to you, the Kennedy family, consider me a grateful American. You know, I wrote The Sum of Us because I firmly believe in the vision that Bobby Kennedy put forward, that he fought for, the cause that he would give his life for, which is the idea that we are truly one human family. And that in this nation of ancestral strangers, it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. We can all be on the same team. And in fact, the segregation and discrimination and inequality, the evil of poverty, they ultimately cost us all. Thank you again for this award. It is the most significant one I could have imagined. I want to dedicate this prize to all of the Americans that I met along my journey who were willing to share their America with me and who, in their own ways, some big and some small, are fighting for an America for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. Our congratulations to both Heather and Elizabeth, winners of the 2022 Robert Francis Kennedy Book Award. So that brings our 2022 RFK Book and Journalism Awards ceremony to a close. All I can say is I hope that we will be together again a year from now, and I hope that we will be doing it in a democracy guided by the light of Robert Francis Kennedy. And as I say goodnight, I'd like to remind you that if anyone wants more information on these awards and the winners, please go to rfkhumanrights.org. rfkhumanrights.org. Everyone, please be safe. Please stay healthy. Thanks so much for watching and being with us. Good night.
Our thanks to all the special guest presenters and to our viewers. To learn more about the important work of RFK Human Rights, we invite you to go to our website, rfkhumanrights.org. Once again, if you would like to support our global efforts, feel free to click on the QR code that appears on your screen. Thanks for joining us for the 2022 RFK Book and Journalism Awards.